We have an exciting agenda with lots of speakers and lots of experts that will share their insights. After a brief welcome by Anna Felth, we'll have two presentations that focus on equal pay, legislation and practice. So what is the regulatory environment in the world? What does this mean for companies, and how are companies preparing for it or already prepared for these regulatory requirements? And then we will come to the heart of the webinar, which is learning from our company speakers and from our experts, where we have representatives from the Equal Pay International Coalition, from Natura, and from Intesa Sanpaolo Bank, Albania, who will be sharing their experiences with us. And as I mentioned, that will then be followed by a Q&A, where we will be hearing and responding to your questions. So without further ado, I think I would love to invite Anna Felth, who is the head of Global WEPs Secretariat at UN Women, to provide us with some opening remarks. Anna, over to you.
Thank you so much, Alex, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, from wherever you are joining. Welcome to this second webinar on our Equal Pay series, organized by the WEPs Secretariat at UN Women and the Equal Salary Foundation. So it's so wonderful to see so many of you joining us today. For those that are recurrent and came also in the first session, you know that we focused on why equal pay matters as a fundamental right, but also as a business imperative. We discussed how gender pay gaps reflect broader inequalities in the workplace. So for those that weren't there, we do have a recording that you can listen and catch up on this topic. Because today I would like to take the conversation one step further. Rather than asking why equal pay matters, let us focus on why governments, regulators, investors, and other stakeholders are increasingly paying attention to it, and what that means for companies in practice. When we talk about the global gender pay gap of around 20%, the figure can feel abstract. But imagine working for 40 years and effectively only being paid 4 days out of a 5-day working week. Then imagine retiring with the lower savings, lower pensions, because those earning gaps accumulated throughout your career. For millions of women around the world, the gender pay gap is not only about today's salary, it is shaping the economic security across their entire lifetimes. So at the same time, unequal outcomes are not always the result of deliberate decisions. Imagine a company where women represent half of the employees and half of all the new recruits. On paper, everything appears balanced and good. But a pay analysis reveals that bonuses are consistently higher in functions dominated by men, while promotion rates are slower in function dominated by women. No one intended to create this inequality, yet the outcome is inequality. So this is precisely why measurement, transparency, and accountability matter. This is also why we are seeing this growing momentum behind pay transparency legislation and reporting requirements around the world. Policymakers increasingly recognize that progress does not happen automatically. It requires better data, stronger accountability, and practical tools that help organizations identify and address inequalities. So, for example, OECD projects that by end of 2026, this year, 84% of its member countries, around 32 countries, will require private sector employers to report on gender pay gaps. Much of this momentum is being driven by the European Union Pay Transparency Directive, but the broader trend is clear. Transparency is rapidly becoming the norm rather than the exception. And while the directive applies within Europe, its influence is likely to extend far beyond the EU borders, as multinational companies, investors, and global supply chains increasingly adopt common expectations around pay transparency and accountability. So for companies, this is not only about compliance, it's about building fairer, more transparent, and more resilient workplaces, while better understanding how pay systems, promotion pathways, and reward structures shapes the outcomes for women and men. So this is very much aligned with our principle 2 of the WEPs. Companies commit to treating all women and men fairly at work and supporting non-discrimination and equal opportunity. Equal pay for work of equal value sits at the heart of that commitment. Today, we are fortunate to be joined by experts from ILO, the Equal Pay International Coalition, represented by UN Women, and 2 of our WEP signatories from Italy, Intesa, Sanpaolo, and Brazil, Natura and Company. They will help us better understand the evolving regulatory landscape, the international standards that underpin it, and the practical implications for companies and as employers. My hope is that today's discussion will leave you with a clear understanding not only where regulations is heading, but also how your organizations can prepare, respond, and lead. So thanks again for joining us, and I look forward to the discussion. Back to you, Alex.
Thank you very much, Anna, for putting that into perspective as well. 4 out of 5 days being paid. That's quite a visual. So thank you for providing us with some welcome remarks. And without further ado, I would invite Aurélien to come in with the first presentation, focusing on what regulatory readiness means for companies. Aurélien is Head of Operations and Communications at the Equal Salary Foundation, which is the co-organizing organization for this 3-part webinar series. Aurélien, over to you.
Thank you very much, Anna. Thank you very much, Alex. So, equal pay is no longer a question of intent. It's a question of evidence. So let's see what regulatory readiness means for companies nowadays. So let's look at this map. Pay equity is no longer a European or US story. Like Anna said at the introduction, it's a global trend. In North America, 14 plus US states already have pay transparency laws, and Canada has had its Federal Pay Equity Act in force since 2021. In Europe, the centerpiece is the EU Pay Transparency Directive, and the UK has been publishing gender pay gaps since 2017. In Asia, Japan introduced disclosure rules in 2022, and Korea and Singapore are moving in the same direction. In Latin America, Brazil's law of 2023 is the boldest move in the region, and we will come back to it shortly. In the Middle East and Africa, South Africa is updating its Employment Equity Act, and the UAE has wage protection rules as well. In Oceania, Australia, since 2024, publishes pay gaps by individual employer's name. So the takeaway is simple. There is nowhere left to hide. Even companies headquartered in low regulation markets are concerned through their subsidiaries, suppliers, and investors. Let's zoom in on Europe. The EU Pay Transparency Directive is indeed the most reference point in the world right now. The deadline for all EU member states was to implement it by last Sunday, and by then all 27 member states should have transposed it into national law. But so far only 4 members did. Slovakia, Lithuania, Malta, and Italy have fully delivered. Regulators in the UK, Canada, Brazil, and Asia are also openly modeling on it. So let's have a look at the EUPD's most interesting requirements. 1, pre-employment transparency. Pay ranges have to be in job ads or shared before the interview. And salary history questions are banned. 2 is the right to information. Employees can now ask for average pay levels for comparable work within the company by gender. So no more taboo on pay regarding this aspect. 3, mandatory reporting. Companies with more than 100 employees must report, and above 250 employees, it's every year. 4, the joint pay assessment. If an unjustified gap is above 5%, the employer must sit down with worker representative and remediate. Also, there is one quiet change that matters a lot. The burden of proof is shifting. If an employee claims pay discrimination, it is the employer who has to prove the difference is objectively justified. Let's zoom in into Brazil and Albania, as we will have two speakers from there during the panel. Brazil first. The law was signed in July 2023, is the boldest move in Latin America. Private employers with more than 100 employees publish pay transparency reports twice a year, in March and September, through the Ministry of Labor portal. And equal pay is required for equal work and work for equal value, the same as in the EU. If a gap appears, the employer must build on an action plan with the union. There is no opting out. And penalties can reach 3% of payroll, plus damages. And very importantly, the data becomes public. And this is one of the aspects as well that is actually changing, of having to be able to display this data publicly for everybody in the company, but for investors and for any stakeholders. Now, Albania, a smaller market, but really interesting. Albania already has a gender equality law from 2008. The labor code already requires equal pay for work of equal value. And as Albania moves through EU accession, it's aligning with the Pay Transparency Directive as well. So if you are operating in the Western Balkans, expect transparency obligation to scale up quickly, as well as in the rest of the world. Bottom line, outside of the EU and the US, same patterns are emerging. Now let's talk compliance versus readiness. Most companies will pass their first reporting cycle. The question is what happened next? The one that struggles are not the one who miss a deadline. They're the one who treat each regulation as a one-off project. Reactive compliance looks fine on paper, last-minute audits, patchwork fixes, everything owned by HR alone. But it creates recurring exposures. Each new law becomes a new project, and every transparency moment puts manager in front of employees they cannot explain pay to. So strategic readiness is different. It treats pay equity as an operating capability. One data model across jurisdiction with cross-functional governance and board oversight. And a narrative that holds up for investors, for regulators, and for employees. Same data, same regulation, two very different outcomes. And readiness is a 4-pillar problem. Let me walk you through it. Pillars 1 and 2, data and system. Let's start with data, because this is where most companies discover they cannot tell their pay equity story, even when they want to. Employee data is scattered across countries, across payroll systems, across vendors. Job titles are not mapped to a common architecture. And work of equal value, which is at the heart of pay equity, requires a credible job classification methodology. Maria José will talk about more of this in a minute. If you cannot classify jobs, you cannot report. One more thing is on data. Do not forget variable pay. Bonuses, equity grants, allowances. That is where many gaps actually live and where many analyses break. Now, systems. Difference between a 6-week annual fire drill and a 1-week refresh is whether your human resource information system, your compensation and your performance tools talk to each other or not. Systems enforce control. A hiring manager should not be able to extend an offer outside an approved range without a documented justification. This is how you stop new gaps from opening as fast as you closed old ones. But, and this is very important, data and systems collapse without the next 2 pillars. So next slide, please. Pillars 3 and 4, governance and culture. Governance is what makes pay equity stick, beyond a single CHRO, beyond a strategy refresh. In mature companies, pay equity has a named executive owner, often the CHRO or the CFO. It reports to a board committee and has a cross-functional steering group. Why cross-functional? Because the work spans from HR to legal, finance, D&I, and communication. If you take one of those out, the work will die in a silo. So there's another reason governance matter. The same number are now appearing in CSRD sustainable system, in ISSB and SEC filings. So the question becomes, is the same figure reported the same way everywhere? If not, regulators and investors will notice quickly. Now, culture and communication. This is the part most companies underinvest in. Transparency without culture is dangerous. If a manager cannot explain why two employees in similar roles are paid differently, transparency creates conflict, not trust. So the companies getting this right invest in their managers, and they align the internal and the external narrative. So put the 4 pillars together: data, system, governance, culture. That is the difference between compliance and capability. Next slide, please. So 3 things to take away. 1, the wave is global and accelerating. The 7th of June 2026 was a hard date, but by 2027, pay equity disclosure is going to be the default environment for any large employers. 2, compliance does not mean readiness. Companies that treat every regulation as a one-off will pay for the same project over and over. Readiness costs less and exposes less. 3, this is a 4-pillar problem. You cannot fix governments with better data, or culture with better systems. They have to advance together. And one last framing: pay equity is no longer just a compliance burden. Handled well, it is one of the most credible signals you can give to investors, regulators, and especially your own people, that the company is well run. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aurélien, for providing us with this distinction between what is compliance, what is readiness, and what companies have to expect. I'm now very honored to invite Maria José to talk a bit more from the ILO perspective. What is the legislation? How are governments reacting? And what are they building? What systems are they building? As well as what this means for companies that operate in those legislations. Maria, over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are joining us from. First, I would like to thank UN Women for inviting the ILO to participate in this webinar. It comes at a particularly timely moment, as it coincides with the International Labour Conference in Geneva, the ILO's annual conference where governments, employers, and workers' representatives come together to discuss key issues shaping the world of work. This year, one of the items on the conference agenda is advancing gender equality in the world of work. To support these discussions, the ILO has prepared a report that will serve as the basis for deliberations among our constituents. The expected outcome is a resolution that will provide guidance to both the ILO and its constituents on future actions to promote gender equality in the world of work. Before we begin, I would also like to mention that this presentation draws heavily on the ILO's recently published guide on pay transparency, which you can see on the screen and access through the link that I will provide later on. Anna has already mentioned some of these figures, so I will only mention the last figure, the fact that the EPIC legal database now covers 188 countries. So as colleagues before me said, that means that wherever your operations are, the rules exist and they are changing. This slide covers the 3 ILO conventions that together form the normative backbone of equal pay obligations. Convention 100 is the Convention on Equal Remuneration, is the primary instrument, and it establishes the concept of equal pay for work of equal value, which is broader than equal pay for equal work. I was told that this was already covered in the previous webinar. This is extremely important because this is really the key concept of equal pay. Convention 111 in non-discrimination covers the broader landscape of employment discrimination, including pay discrimination, but also other discrimination in recruitment, promotion, or training. And finally, Convention 131 on minimum wage fixing, which is very important because women are disproportionately concentrated in low-wage jobs. When minimum wages are set too low, or exclude certain sectors like care, or are poorly enforced, women are the primary victims. So ratifying Convention 131 and designing minimum wage systems that are universal is one of the most direct tools to reduce the gender pay gap at the population level. But how does Convention 100 translate into practice? what does good legislation actually look like? Chapter 3 of the ILO guide identifies 6 pillars, and I want to walk you through them briefly because even if your country has not yet enacted all of this, the direction, as was already been said, the direction of travel globally is very, very clear. Pillar 1, define remuneration broadly. Laws that only cover base salary miss the gap. So legislation and good practice both require a broad definition of remuneration, not just the base salary, but all bonuses, allowances, overtime, in-kind benefits, transport allowances, and pension contributions. Pillar 2, enshrining the principle of equal value in law, not just equal work. This requires legislation to allow comparison across different job types using objective criteria, which are skills, effort, responsibility, and working conditions. Pillar 3, mandate objective job evaluations. The law should not just state the principle of equal pay for work of equal value, it should require employers to use tools and methods that are free from gender bias. Pillar 4, enforce with real consequences. This means record-keeping obligations, regular reporting, penalties for not compliance, and access to remedy for workers. And Pillar 6, involve social partners. Trade unions and employers' organizations should be embedded in the design, implementation, and monitoring of pay equity measures. And this is not just good governance, it is explicitly required under Convention 100, which has been ratified by 80-something% of EU member states. So it's considered one of the universally ratified conventions. These slides give you the full landscape of what legislation is now requiring of employers, and why I want to highlight a key few points. Job evaluations. Job evaluations are already legally required in countries such as Canada, France, Mauritius, South Africa, and this is not a future trend. It is current law in major economies. Pay audits. Pay audits, which are requirement to systematically review payroll data, is required in France, Iceland, Spain, Sweden, South Africa, and the EU directive will extend this significantly across all member states. Pay equity plans, which are formal frameworks to identify and correct wage disparities, are also required in a number of countries. And I would like to highlight here that these are comprehensive obligations, not tick box exercises. Record keeping, the requirement to maintain transparent records on wages, bonuses, and evaluations, is already mandatory in countries such as Chile, Germany, New Zealand, and Peru. Workers and trade unions' involvement is also becoming a legal requirement. Countries like Brazil, France, the Republic of Korea, Spain, and South Africa already have this kind of provisions. And public disclosure, the requirement to publish results, is expanding very fast. Australia, Brazil, France, Iceland, Israel, Japan, Peru, the Republic of Korea, and Spain all require some form of public reporting. If your enterprise operates across multiple jurisdictions, you likely already have legal obligations in more than one of these categories. The EPIC database is the place to check. Now, we have covered the legal framework. Now, let's turn to the most powerful practical tool available to enterprises, the objective job evaluation. This is where pay equity moves from principle to practice. A job evaluation is a systematic assessment of the content of a job. It asks one question: what does this role actually require? And it has 4 subsequent questions. What skills, qualifications, and knowledge? What level of effort, physical, mental, and emotional? What responsibilities for people, for data, and for resources? And what working conditions, physical hazards, and psychological demands? Crucially, it is not a performance appraisal. It evaluates the role, not the individual. And it must be conducted using criteria that are free from gender bias. This means, for example, that emotional labor, physical care work, and social skills must be given equal weight to technical knowledge and physical strength. The process has 7 steps. You can see them on the right in the blue table. The key moment is step 2. Identifying which roles in your enterprise are female-dominated and which are male-dominated. This is where structural undervaluation typically becomes visible. The ILO recommends that wherever possible, job evaluations are designed and overseen with the participation of workers and their representatives through a pay committee or equivalent body. This is not just good governance, it increases the credibility and legitimacy of the results. Next, please. This table is from the annex of the ILO guide, simplified from the Unison job evaluation exercise in the UK. I want to spend a moment here because it illustrates exactly what objective job evaluation is designed to expose. We are comparing two roles, a residential social care worker and an ITC support staff member. Both require comparable knowledge, both score 60. Both require similar mental skills, 39 each. Both involve comparable physical skills and financial responsibilities. But look at where the differences appear. Interpersonal and communication skills. The care worker scores 52. The ITC support staff, 26. Emotional demands. The care worker scores 40. Dealing with vulnerable people, challenging behaviors, regular emotional effort. The ITC role scores 10. Responsibility for people, 39 versus 26. Total scores, the social worker scores 406, the ITC support staff scores 328. And yet, in most countries, in most enterprises, the ITC support role is paid more. This is not because ITC staff are more valuable. It is because care work is feminized and feminized work has been systematically undervalued. This is the problem that job evaluations are designed to make visible. And once it is visible, it becomes legally and reputationally indefensible to leave it unaddressed. The good news is that you do not need to build a job evaluation methodology from scratch. I'm not going to enter into explaining each of them. They are available in the web pages of the different governments. The important thing is that governments in many countries have already developed free validated tools. Some of them are using different types of tools to like data analysis tools and job evaluation methods, or they are using practical step-by-step guides and online platforms. But you can enter into each of them and see how they look and if they can be useful for you. In addition to the tools developed by governments, the ILO is currently developing an automated Excel-based tool for enterprises with more than 50 employees. The tool is being designed in response to requests from EU accession countries and aims to support enterprises in complying with the EU Pay Transparency Directive. At the same time, the ILO's broader objective is to develop a free, globally accessible tool that can support implementation of Convention 100 in countries across the world. The tool will be piloted in Moldova and Ukraine in the fourth quarter of 2026, and in 2027, the ILO plans to develop a simplified version for enterprises with fewer than 50 employees and continue work on a web-based application to make the tool more widely accessible. Beyond tool development, the ILO has invested several years in advancing methodologies for measuring the gender pay gap more accurately, including approaches that capture how pay gaps vary across the income distribution, which is absolutely crucial. The organization has also conducted empirical analysis in numerous countries, generating evidence to support policy development and pay equity initiatives. Just a reminder that this year in October, there will be updated estimates of the gender pay gap globally using the methodology that I've just mentioned. And finally, the ILO has recently published the guide mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, which can be accessed through the link on this slide. And I have also included a link to the International Labour Conference report referenced earlier for those interested in exploring the topic further. Next, please. The third pillar that I want to cover today is pay transparency. This is the fastest moving area in equal pay policy globally. The fundamental logic is simple. Pay gaps persist partly because of information asymmetry. Workers do not know what their colleagues earn, which means they cannot identify discrimination, and employers face no reputational or legal pressure to correct it. Transparency breaks that asymmetry. For the employer's perspective, transparency tools actually help you identify and fix problems before they can become legal liabilities. For the worker's perspective, access to pay information enables fair negotiation and empowers individuals and trade unions to challenge discriminatory practices. For the governments, pinpoint where and how to target enforcement and monitor progress over time. And the evidence is strong. Austria, Denmark, Canada and the UK have all seen measurable reductions in the gender pay gap following the introduction of transparency legislation. Perhaps the most striking finding. In the United Kingdom, public disclosure of company pay gaps drove a 71% drop in non-compliant firms without any financial penalties. Accountability alone drove compliance. Italy has gone a bit further with a positive incentive. Companies that obtain gender equality certification receive a 1% reduction in social security contributions, worth up to 50,000 euros per year, plus preference in public procurement. But pay transparency is not one thing, it is a menu of measures, and enterprises can adopt them at different levels of ambition depending on their situation and the country where they are established. The most basic is allowing employees to request pay information. Giving individuals the right to ask what people in comparable roles earn is crucial, and several Nordic countries have already been doing this for years. Salary range disclosure in job advertisements is now required under the EU directive and increasingly common in US states. The evidence shows that it raises wages for women and improves negotiating equity from the start of the employment. And this is very important. It prevents discrimination from happening. Regular pay audits are required also in a good number of countries, and the EU directive will also expand this number of countries. These are not one-off exercises, as also was said already. They need to be embedded in annual HR processes. Let me mention the France Gender Equality Index, because it's quite specific. Every company with 50 or more employees must publish a score from 0 to 100. Scores below 75 trigger an obligation to negotiate improvement measures with employee representatives. This is a public accountability mechanism that has driven genuine change. Joint pay assessments with employee representatives, which is required under the EU directive and which is for the ILO the most robust form of transparency because they embed social dialogue directly into pay equity governance. And finally, digital tools, which are increasingly important. Standardized reporting platforms reduce the administrative burden, particularly for SMEs, and AI-powered analytics can identify pay disparities across multiple dimensions simultaneously, provided they are designed with anti-bias safeguards and developed in consultation with workers' representatives. Next, please. So let me close with 5 things I want you to take away from today. First, the legislative tide is rising, and is rising fast. Second, objective job evaluation is your most powerful diagnostic tool. It reveals a structural undervaluation that salary comparisons alone cannot see, and it gives you an evidence that is defensible to regulators, workers, and courts. Third, transparency builds trust. Enterprises that move proactively on pay disclosure are increasingly seen as employers of choice, and the evidence is clear. Transparency reduces gaps. Fourth, social dialogue is an accelerator. Involving workers' representatives in job evaluation, pay auditing, and transparency reporting increases the credibility of the process and the speed of implementation. It also reduces the risk of legal challenges. Fifth, the tool exists. You don't need to start from scratch. Governments already have developed tools. The ILO will launch a new tool in November, and the EPIC legal database tells you exactly what applies in your country. I stop here. I hope that it has been somehow interesting for you, and I will remain here for any comment of questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much to both of you for these expert presentations. I've used the word expert too much already, but we are now moving to our expert panel, which features both the EPIC, Equal Pay International Coalition, which has been mentioned previously. Marie Berg will be representing EPIC and sharing some of the additional information on how their work is advancing equal pay across the world and how you can also use it. And then we have two companies who will be sharing with us how they have managed, how they have advanced equal pay within their companies. Because it is one thing to know about the laws and the requirements, but it is a very different thing as well to understand how how companies are either being preemptive of the laws and the regulations, how they are driving societies towards more equal pay and gender equality, and also the challenges that they have faced. So I will be spotlighting each of them, but I'm very honored to have Gleycia Leite and Suela Totokoci join us for this panel. Aurélien, I'm handing over to you for the moderation and very much look forward to learning from your experiences.
Thank you very much, Alex, and thank you again, Maria José, for the very, very interesting presentation. So like Alex said, I'm delighted to be joined by three experts who bring complementary perspective from global policy to implementation within a company. So before we start, Marie Berg, can you just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about EPIC?
Yes, of course. First of all, thank you for having me in this webinar. It's a great pleasure to join this group of very ambitious companies. My name is Marie Berg. I work as a program analyst in the economic empowerment section at UN Women, but today I'm here to present you EPIC. EPIC is the only global multi-stakeholder partnership dedicated to closing the gender pay gap worldwide. It is co-led by ILO, UN Women, and the OECD, and brings together governments, employers, and workers' organizations, private sector companies, civil society, and academia under one roof, all towards a single goal: equal pay for work of equal value.
Thank you very much, Marie. Suela Totokoci, thank you again also for joining us. You also introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about Intesa Sanpaolo Bank Albania.
Yeah. First of all, thank you for the opportunity given by the organizer of this beautiful event. My name is Suela Totokoci, 26 years within the same bank, working in different structure of the bank, and only in the last 3 years I'm managing HR and organization of the bank. Being part of Intesa Sanpaolo Group, as a subsidiary or as a foreign bank in Albania, it is pretty much important since we bring in the country the international experience. And we are happy to set benchmarks in this country from many perspectives, where it includes the pay transparency and the pay gap. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Suela. And finally, Gleycia Leite, can you also introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about Natura & Co?
Of course. Thank you for having me. I'm Gleycia Leite. I'm a white woman with brown eyes and brown hair, shoulder length. I'm wearing a brown shirt and a jeans. And I'm speaking now from London, but I'm Brazilian and I live in Brazil. And I have nearly 20 years of experience in leading organizational programs of transformation and leading high strategic impact programs across Latin America. I'm now focused on building organizational models and ways of working that could be able to connect talent, innovation, and business strategy to accelerate sustainable value creation. At Natura & Co, now we used to name only Natura, that includes Avon and Natura brands. I currently lead organizational transformation, compensation, and HR digitalization for the whole Latin America. And it's a pleasure to be here talking to you, an expert panel, to talk about this subject that is both a social imperative and economic opportunity. So I hope to learn a lot with you guys.
Thank you very much for this introduction. So we're going to start directly with the practical implementation of the subject matter, and I want to talk to you, Suela and Gleycia, about the reality in Brazil and Albania. So what makes pay equity a business issue rather than a compliance issue, and why are you ahead of the curve?
Well, interesting question. I needed a moment to reflect, since we had your presentation and the presentation from Maria José, where we see all the requirements that the whole world need to comply. Differently, even though you made a very brief presentation on the regulatory framework in Albania, we do not have the obligation to make the reporting on the pay gap. We started this implementation since in 2021 by not considering that there is a box which we need to tick. For Intesa Sanpaolo Bank Albania, always based on the fact that we are part of a big group, we wanted to guarantee pay transparency and as well equally paid compensation between the female and male. It is pretty much interesting, which is not in all the sectors and which is not in all the countries. 70% of our entire bank population, it is represented by women. So we consider women the right engine of our bank. So we are not here just satisfying the regulator, but we need to satisfy our asset, or how we call it in the bank, people first. So we had this mentality in our bank during the business plan 2025-2025, but we will continue among the digitalization and transformation, putting in the first place our colleagues. So by saying all this, I believe that you all agree that we don't have to report to the regulatory institution about our compensation strategy, but we do it in order to be a step ahead with all the new regulation which will come into force in Albania as a country wishing and hardly working to join the EU. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Suela. Leite.
So following here. I don't know if everybody knows Natura. Natura is a beauty company. It's a leading beauty company in Latin America. But our identity goes far beyond our business footprint. We operate in 80 countries nowadays, and we are supported by more than 3 million beauty consultants in direct sales operating model, business model. We have nowadays more than 12,000 employees across our operations. And our reason of being, it's anchored in a concept that we call bem estar bem, which translates to well-being, being well. It defines our relationship. So the harmony of the individual with themselves, with themselves, with the other, and with the planet. I'm talking about it because I need to recognize my place of privilege of being in a company that have with also a core belief and a strategic priority, the diversity in her core beliefs. And we believe that we are now transitioning our model, our business model, of a sustainable business model to a regenerative one, because we believe that sustaining the world as it is no longer enough. And so we structured 2020 vision, where we committed to generate positive net impact where our business serves as a tool for the restoration of life. And one of our beliefs is that the greater the diversity of the parts, the greater the vitality of the whole. So this is not just a philosophy. It's the bedrock on how we manage our people and how we manage our business. So when we decided to address these aspects of defend human rights and being more humans, we committed to quantitative goals and to public commitments for 2030 and 2050. And it becomes a strategic priority to the whole leadership and to the whole employees in our operations. And understand that we are in the privileged position that does not reduce our responsibility, because we know that in the business model based on a force for good that we call this 3 million people, 3 million consultants, majority women, and more than 2,000 employees, majority women. It's not just a regular regulatory or legislation aspect. It's about the coherence we need to do, and we need to reinforce and we stimulate in the whole environment. It's also a social imperative and an economic perspective. Even in Brazil, we have majority of women, and the recent data show us that health women are leading economically their households. We have women earning more than 21% less men. So as a Brazilian company based in Brazil with the majority of women inside, it's more than articulate and follow the law. We decided to eliminate pay gender gap and also race pay gap 3 years before the law. So we are facing and structuring our internal policies since 2020. And nowadays we are proud to say that we have more than 50% of our high leadership position running and led by women. And we have eliminated the pay gender gap and race gap 1 year before the law is running and published in Brazil. So we have a lot to do, and we have a lot to learn and to do together.
Thank you very much, Gleycia. This is very impressive and very inspiring. And well done for having achieved that in Brazil. I think you're one of the leading of companies in this sector. I want to build on this idea of collective action and accountability, and I want to bring in Marie Berg from EPIC. So EPIC is the only global coalition on this issue. So what can government, companies and investors can achieve together that laws alone cannot?
Yes, what makes EPIC unique is precisely what laws cannot do alone. It creates a space for collective learning and coordinated action across different sectors and regions. As a member, your organization gains access to a global network of now 77 diverse members, to peer-reviewed research, practical tools, and as Maria José has mentioned before, EPIC's legal database on pay legislation. There's one exclusive opportunity that EPIC offers that I would like to highlight: the annual EPIC technical meeting. That's the coalition's flagship members-only event held each year. It brings together all EPIC members to exchange best practices, to share the latest research, and to showcase innovative tools on equal pay. Last year, the technical meeting took place in New York at UN Women's headquarters, but I'm really excited to share that this year in September, EPIC member Ireland will host it in Dublin. Ireland just joined EPIC last year, so I think this is also a great example of the engagement and enthusiasm of our newest members. The good news is that joining EPIC is free and open to any organization committed to this agenda agenda. There is review process, so there are certain standards that for example, the private sector, governments, and civil society and other interested organizations have to meet. But once you have been cleared and reviewed, you can join EPIC and use this space to learn from others, but also, yeah, bring in your own ideas, bring in your own tools, and to learn more about how to join EPIC. Please feel free to check out our website where you can sign up your interest of joining EPIC, but you can also feel free to reach out to me after.
We know that a lot of progress runs on voluntary promises. We see also sometimes a lot of pink or purple washing that companies can do. How do you tell a real commitment from a hollow one?
Should I also go ahead with that question?
Yes, please.
Okay, happy to go ahead. So I would say, to make it short, 3 things separate a genuine commitment from a hollow one. The first aspect would be transparency. The company has to ask themselves, does it publish the pay gap? And is this pay gap disaggregated by gender, by level, and by contract type? The second point would be action. I think we all know that actions speak more than words. So the question is, are there concrete time-bound remediation plans? Are managers held accountable with targets tied to performance? And then the third point would be verification. Is there independent certification or audit? And I'm happy to share a bit more about this later when I talk about some EPIC best practices. But to put it in a nutshell, I would say voluntary action becomes credible when it is measurable, accountable, and sustained over time.
Thank you very much. Suela and Gleycia, I want also to ask you from your perspective, because you've been the one implementing it in your company, what is the most effective policies for closing the gender pay gap? And how did you convince leadership, if you had to? And did you experience any backlash or pushbacks regarding this type of implementation?
Complicated to summarize into 3 minutes, but I would say, as we listen from the previous presentation, it is important to have the right compensation and remuneration policy in place, which explain each and every details of the compensation, and there you try to be as much as transparent as possible. As well, the regulatory framework should be, as we have done, to have the diversity, equity, and inclusion in place, which is a regulatory framework which needed to be updated and every year, but trying to reflect the best practices in the market. Last but not least, the tricky thing, and then for sure there are other we just heard, it is to make the analysis based on the data. So you have to have the right tools in order to collect the data, analyze the data based on what it is defined in the compensation and remuneration policies. And not only that, you have to double check the accuracy of the data and to further and deeper analyze where are the differences, why these differences have been spotted out, and last but not least, make a plan in order to adjust accordingly, in order to minimize the deviation from what we call it the internal benchmark. How we do it, just for sharing with you the experience, we create clusters. Then we make the average for each cluster. We make the allocation of each colleague according to the so-called internal benchmark, and we see what is the percentage of deviation from the internal benchmark. In case we see deviation which cannot be explained, because for sure there are some deviation based on the fact that someone, I take it as an example, someone has been newly appointed to a position. So by the time that the probation period has passed, for sure, you'll see that he or she might be in line with the internal benchmark. You have to make the real forecast. And in order to complete it, once you have done that, you have to see what is the impact in the P&L, because we know that all the companies at the end, at least banking, we are profitable companies, so we have to take care of the potential impact of any deviation we find now in a longer term perspective and adjust accordingly. So by just recognizing the differences and by acknowledge them, it's nothing. Now, if I would go back to the fact that are we ready as Albania to make the publication? Not yet, but really willing to go in that direction. As soon as we finish or we fine-tune the data in the newly introduced tool, which we use it for the compensation, not only in Albania, but group-wise, we will be ready right after that to make even the publication step ahead from what it is required from the local regulators. I don't know if I answered to your question.
No, you haven't answered very comprehensively.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Suela.
Thank you.
Gleycia, what's your experience?
Oh, in Natura, we have to work in both ways. So, and to connect hearts and to connect brains. Talking about connecting hearts, it's beyond a compensation issue. It reflects broad structural challenge that affects women and economic participation and careers progression. We know that we have, not only in Brazil, but in the whole Latin America, unequal access to leadership positions, opportunities, unequal distribution of the caregiving responsibility, gaps of transparency and accountability on these subjects. And talking about this in a majority female employees company, it's catches the heart. We have this stronger belief in diversity and inclusion and how diversity could empower our business and the whole society. And we have, when we start all the studies, the majority of women, but on the bottom of the organization, we didn't have representative women in high leadership position. So when we put this whole information together and we call for our coherence, we took the hearts, but we need to take the brain. Also, we need to build this not as HR goal or an HR team imagination, you know, recognizing our privilege in have diversity as a belief. We put this on a business plan, on a regenerative business plan. We know that when a woman thrives, she creates opportunities for other people around her. And when families thrive, communities thrives. When communities thrives, the whole region thrives and the whole business thrives. And we put this in an economical equation, and we prove that when we invest in women careers, and when the whole employees prosper, the whole business also prosper, and the society also prosper. So driving running these two paths and connecting and engaging hearts and brains, we put together a whole strategic plan since 2020. So, and we decided to be transparent and to be accountable on that. And transparency requires methodology. So we have partnered with global consultancies, we conducted independent studies and put together with with global references. We have invested in studies to map salary disparities based on gender in Latin America, but also in race in Brazil. We structure a methodology with a detailed process to collect the whole data, gathering information on salary, role, experience, region, and we create a process to identify progressively and to identify monthly and not only annually the salary variations, and some of those we can explain by performance, experience, role, responsibility, complexity, region, or country, but some of those cannot be explained. And we committed to eliminate all of this gap that we could not explain by these 15 factors that we detailed and discussed with the whole leadership. And each individual, for each individual, we succeed in determining a predicted salary, and we compare this predicted salary with the real one. And beyond eliminate this pay gap, we structured internal process to educate leadership in gender gap, to educate both men and women, about the inequality and how it could be important, how it needs to be important to our internal leadership to face it as their own responsibility. And we prepare our internal process to eliminate gaps, not only in the pay review, in the annual pay review, but in recruitment, in careers progression, even if this gap is historical. So we understand that when we put together our belief with a strategic, huge and robust plan, with also supported by the whole economics, and when we face that this economics could be beyond the company's walls, because we are a company that is committed to create net positive impact. So it's both social and economic. So inside our organization, we need to be both social and economical, and engaged by heart and by brands, as in the consistent plan that engage not only leadership but people by themselves, knowing about her historical, knowing about their roles, knowing about the possible gaps and the possible minor violences on that they lived in their historical paths, and understanding that if you are a leadership inside Natura, you are committed not only with the prosper with of this own business. We are committed with the prosper of the society we are included. So it's not.
Thank you very much.
It's not a single perspective. It's not a simple perspective, I know, but I truly understand that when we can put together the social and the economics, we can build really impactful plans.
Oh, absolutely. I think it needs to be a comprehensive, holistic approach to make sure that this is actually, working and is also sustained over time. Marie Berg, I wanted to ask you also a last question. We've seen that, legislations are improving and getting better, but we've also seen a lot of pushbacks on ESG, especially in the last few months. So I wanted to have your opinion quickly on how do you keep companies moving, for equal pay when sometimes the legal pressure can ease.
So I would say this is where practical tools become essential that make it easy and also worthwhile to act regardless of what regulators require. And I'd like to use this opportunity to present 2 EPIC recognized good practice tools, which are from EPIC members for the companies that are here today. So one of them, you've already heard it, it's called Logip. There's a reason why it's already that popular. It has been developed by the Swiss Federal Office for Gender Equality. It is a free science-based tool that helps companies build a transparent pay equity system grounded in the principle of equal pay for work of equal value. It evaluates job functions against their requirements and demands. It proposes consistent pay bands and identifies where individual salaries fall outside expected ranges. It's especially well suited for small and medium-sized enterprises. I know some of them are here today, and it has received the EPIC Good Practice label, which is, by the way, also something that EPIC is doing. So you can develop best practices, and once it passes the requirements of EPIC, you can receive the EPIC Good Practice label, and other EPIC members will benefit from it. And the second one, which is also kind of connected to it, is the Fair on Pay Aware label. For also companies with fewer than 100 employees, Fair on Pay offers a one-day workshop and certification that combines training on equal pay for work of equal value with a hands-on analysis using Logip. So I'm making the connection to the previous tool. You can combine them well. If the company meets the standard, it earns a label that is valid for 4 years. It's a credible, visible signal of commitment to clients, talent, and investors. And also this underlying tool has been awarded the EPIC Good Practice label. But last but not least, I would also like to highlight that, of course, in addition to these examples, equal pay for work of equal value for companies is more, or there are more benefits behind it than just complying with the law, if there is a law, because there are also many other attractive reasons for companies to ensure pay equity, even if there is no legal pressure behind it. So just to name a few examples, stronger talent pipelines, higher retention, better ESG ratings, and of course also a better public reputation that then again opens the doors in procurement for partnerships and also investor relations.
Great, thank you very much, Marie. Unfortunately, we are, getting to the end of the allocated time for this panel, but I would like to thank you all very much for all the insight you shared with us this afternoon, this morning, or this evening, wherever you are in the world. We've heard today that equal pay is not simply a compliance exercise; it requires educated leadership, reliable data, effective governance, and sustained commitment. We've also heard that meaningful progress happens when governments, companies, and other stakeholders work together. And that especially organizations do not need to wait for regulation to begin taking action, like Intesa Bank or Natura & Co. And that it pays off. That is actually, good for business. It's good for, the company culture. It's good for productivity. It's good for society at large. So it's, it's not just another compliance exercise, another tick the box exercise, but this is something that is actually benefiting everyone, not just the women that are unfortunately paid less. So thank you very much, Marie, Gleycia, and Suela. With that, I would like to hand the floor back to Anna for questions from the audience and the remainder of the session. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you so much, Aurélien. Thanks everyone for your amazing presentations, very insightful, very, as also Alex said, we are learning a lot from you today. I think there are 2 main questions that have come from our participants today. One is about transparency, like how do you actually prove that you have disclosed it? What are the standards for the proof itself? Let's say, I think this participant have disclosed, for example, salary during an interview. How do you actually show that you did that? So a little bit about the proof of this, and I'm not asking anyone in particular, but if you have any insights to that question. And also because we are running towards the end, I'm going to ask the second question at the same time, and then maybe we can make a round from all of you. It's about AI. AI is on everybody's mind these days. For you, is it a problem when it comes to equal pay, or is it actually a solution? Somebody is asking what reporting tools are available that has this anti-bias safeguards built into them. So a little bit about technology, AI, and I think also we heard from ILO about the systems is one key pillar. So maybe we'll, who would like to start? Maria José, can I ask you to come in first? And you can tackle it from any angle that you'd like, these two questions.
Yes, actually, I mean, when it comes to AI, one of the colleagues was asking if we know tools. I don't know any tool, AI tool, which includes the necessary safeguards at this moment. And I would say that it will take some time to develop. The ILO doesn't recommend any of it at this moment. I would like to also respond to one of the questions that was in the Q&A, because it refers to how to ensure that in the current context with the backlash, we keep progressing on equal pay. And I would like to say that from the ILO perspective, the conventions themselves are very important. As I said, Convention 100 is a fundamental convention, and it's widely ratified. So even if in a country the domestic law is amended or weakened, trade unions and employers' organizations can bring complaints against the state through the ILO supervisory mechanism for no compliance with the convention. So the conventions are usually above the other domestic laws, and therefore can be called if the law is changed. And it's also important to involve other key actors of the world of work, like trade unions, because or employers' organizations, they can also submit compliance and fight back if there is a risk of backlash. I would stop here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maria José, for bringing this issue up. It's almost like once they have ratified a convention, it's almost like you can't go back, even though legislation is weakened. So thanks for addressing that point as well. Marie?
Yes, thank you, Anna. I would also like to comment on a few of the questions. So first of all, the one, how do you know that a company is actually transparent? I think one of the ways how you can ensure this is to actually have independent certification and to have another company that you're working with to do the audit that can basically do the checks and balances. But I also believe that this is why multiple solutions at the same time are important. So for example, in addition to the audit, we need the pay transparency, because even if a company says everything is transparent in our company, but the employers know that this is not the case, of course, the word will make the round. And this is also, as Maria José said, why trade unions are so important, because if it actually comes out in the circle of employers that the transparency is not as it is promised, then in the best scenario, there will be collective action by trade unions who are publicly discussing this grievance. And then just a few words on AI. I also believe that when it comes to AI and when we use it for such tools, there is a bit of a risk that it will replicate stereotypes and biases that we already have and that we try to get away from. For example, as it has been mentioned, that there is a job segregation, that there are some jobs that are traditionally seen as less productive or less important than some, although they contribute massively to our society, like care jobs. So if we get to the point that AI is used, I think this is an area where we would have to be very careful, and of course also have the human input into it.
Thank you, Marie. Gleycia?
So jumping on Marie's answer, when we talk about how can we ensure the real data and the consistency in data, for Natura, for example, we decided to partner with global consultancies, and we have independent audits on our numbers. And also we have to, twice a year, we have to disclosure the whole information, detailed information to government. And we have this pay gap transparency report in Brazil that also the government and labor ministry are also now auditing and checking our numbers and the whole information we provide. And jumping on AI perspective, I truly believe that if for Natura, for example, we decided to use AI as anti-bias process. We have launched a couple of months ago our first precision pay process with AI. And imagining that we have this whole data that we have collected to be to ensure living wage and to eliminate pay gender gap. We have the whole data about experience, roles, location, jobs, job title, not only titles, but roles and responsibilities, performances, historical performances, and before people join Natura as well. And with this whole data, no bias in a no bias process, we created this precision pay based on AI, and the whole leadership receives in an annual salary review the increase that every single person based on this whole criteria need to earn. And we believe that when we combine the artificial intelligence with the human intelligence, we can create stronger and sustainable and real regenerative process. But combining both of them, not only using AI as a single tool, but as in a new and another intelligence to put together to accelerate our real commitments.
Thank you so much. This is very helpful insight that it could actually, it's not only a problem, but it could also be a solution if we as humans are part of thinking it through and how it's being used. I will hand it over to you, Aurelia.
Yeah, shortly, I want to jump on the answer from Gleycia about AI. I absolutely agree with the fact that we can't let a hands-off approach for AI, but we always have to have this human interaction and human check at the end of the whole process to make sure that things are actually correct. In relation with the questions on reporting tools, I can actually mention a couple of platforms that are well known, but if people want to check them out, it's Sindio and Pay Analytics, for example, that are great reporting tools with the ability to actually produce reports that are EU compliance directly built in, and they also are using AI within. So those are really great tools. But of course, if you really want to have something that is thorough and trustworthy, I would also encourage a third-party independent certification at the end of the process to actually make sure that this has been done fairly. And finally to answer the first question, which I think was about how do you know when you have shared the pay with regard with the UPTD, I think. So this is about making sure that it's being shared in written form. So it needs to be written on the job advertisement or shared within an official email regarding the jobs. Like just mentioning it already doesn't count. So it needs to be written somewhere. So you can go back to it and use it as proof.
Thank you so much for adding that perspective. Suela, we are about to close. I will give you an opportunity also to talk a little bit about your bank in Albania and why you think that it is not a compliance issue, but it's really a business issue. I know that you have really been thinking this through. And if you could help us close off this webinar with your perspective and why this is good for business.
Yeah. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to close the webinar with some remarks from Albania. We are a small country, but a very particular one. We are trying to join the EU. We are making all the efforts in order to be aligned with all the EU countries and regulation. As I said, we are unique. We are small, but we have so many peculiarities based on what it has been done in the past, how this country has been managed. I was reflecting during the webinar and the beauty of this country during the communism era. It has been a lot to empower women. I know that it's never ended story. It will still continue to be a fight in order to find the balance, the gender balance, or whatever balance we are facing in a day-to-day. But at least we have done so much, and for us it has been very important in order to keep what has done and to further reinforce. So based on the fact that we wanted to be a leader in the market, in order that we wanted to set up a benchmark, we decided to go a step ahead. And it is based as well, I told you that I've been in HR only in the last 3 years. So I have history in infrastructure, and I have seen HR from an outsider perspective. And now, in the last 3 years, I'm here to set some strategical initiatives in order to be the employer of choice. And I believe the fact, the pay transparency, it is pretty much important. And I have it in my heart, and we work every day in order to go in that direction. Just an example, all my colleagues in the HR, even though this is not a gender balance, we are all women trying to work as much as possible to make it happen. So I close with that by thanking again for the opportunity to share with you my thoughts, our experience, and our targets. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Suela, and thanks for giving that deep dive into the perspective in Albania. It's very helpful and useful for others as well. We are just at the time to close, so I just would like to add 2 perspectives. For those that have participated, we did share the link to the EPIC database earlier, where you have access to what is covered from an equal pay perspective in your country. So if you're curious, you don't know, here is the opportunity to deep dive. Or if you have trade or business in other countries, it's also very helpful what that means for your company. But just we heard at the beginning that transparency builds trust. I think that's a very key message that came out. Trust with all stakeholders. And I really liked Gleycia, we are ultimately connecting hearts and we are connecting the brains. And I think with that, I will thank everyone for your expertise shared, your questions asked, and for your active participation. We will be back with the 3rd webinar, so look out for that. And Alex, if you could just share the link to the registration of the last and final Equal Pay webinar. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining, and see you soon.